Zach here, and we are going to jump into the very first book, The Complete Private Pilot, written by Bob Gardner and published by ASA. This is the 12th edition, by the way. The very first chapter in the book talks about the differences between a Part 61 and Part 141 flight school. Part 61 is more of an on your own, which is what I'm doing through this curriculum. You still have to do the flight hours with a certified instructor and all that, but we'll get into that later. Part 141 would be where you actually go to a school and go over curriculum. They either have their own curriculum, whether it's this book or a different curriculum written by somebody else. Obviously, it's up to the individual school. But for the purposes of this video series, we're going to be dealing with Part 61. Also, one thing I wanted to mention was, for a very good explanation in the difference between Part 61 and Part 141 flight schools, head over to the YouTube channel, Angle of Attack. Chris Palmer does a really good job on explaining the differences between the two flight schools. The book starts out explaining the different types of certificates you can get related to flying. The first one is the student pilot certificate. You need to be 16 years of age and apply for the certificate. That way you have to have this certificate before you can do any solo. I believe that you can do training through a school before you get this, but you have to have it in order to log any solo hours. The next one is light sport pilot license, which is the most minimum certificate you can get. It only allows you to fly light sport aircraft. You cannot fly out of a radio tower controlled facility. You cannot have any passengers, and there's no night flying. The next one is your recreational pilot certificate. In order to achieve that certificate, you have to have a minimum of 30 hours flight training, 3 hours solo and 15 hours instructed, and then the balance of that is a mixture of both. The restrictions with a recreational certification is you cannot fly at night. You are restricted to 50 miles from your home airport. You can't go into any radio-controlled airspace, one passenger, and 180 horsepower or less. The next certificate that you can achieve, which is the one I'm going to be going for, is your private pilot certificate. In order to get that, you have to have 40 hours of flight time logged, 10 hours solo, 20 hours instructed, and the balance a mixture of that. You have to have 3 hours instrument training, which is putting on blinders in the cockpit with your instructor there, flying by just the instruments. 3 hours of training for cross country, which is greater than 50 miles from your home airport, and one night flight of a minimum of 100 miles. Your solo requirements are 5 hours of cross country with one trip of 150 miles, 3 hours of test prep for your practical test. You also need a third-class medical certificate. And then when your instructor feels that you're ready, you will go to a designated pilot examiner and take your practical test. The next rating, which I would like to get as soon as I get my PPE, is the instrument rating, and you need 40 hours of actual or simulated instrument-only flight. That's for Part 61, 35 hours for Part 141 school. Commercial certification, which is the one I would eventually like to get, you have to have 250 hours with a Part 61 school and 190 with a 141 school, of which 100 of those hours is pilot in command, with 50 hours pilot in command in a cross-country flight. You also have to have a second-class medical certificate. Another rating that you can get is your multi-engine rating. There's no minimum time, but you have to demonstrate proficiency to a CFI that you can handle a multi-engine aircraft. The next rating you can get is your CFI rating, which is Certified Flight Instructor. There's no minimum flight hours for that, but you have to have your commercial pilot certificate and your instrument rating, plus you take 2 exams in order to get your CFI certification. And then the very tippy top is the airline transport pilot. 1,200 hours is the minimum, 23 years old, and the book explains that you probably are going to have a bachelor's degree in order to get accepted to any airline program. Well, with that being said, I'm going to jump into the very first chapter, which is basic aerodynamics. See you on episode 3.